Welcome to Tenacity with Sonia C, the podcast where we dive into stories behind success, uncovering lessons learned and the insights gained by leaders and innovators in the business world. I'm your host, Sonia, and let's get started. Today's guest joining me is Katrina Purcell. Katrina is not just an entrepreneur, she's a powerhouse of positivity and determination who believes in creating her own path in life. From tackling a full Ironman to pursuing an executive MBA while working full time, and recently making the bold leap from corporate America to start her own company, Katrina embodies what it means to live courageously and authentically. Today, she's here to share her inspiring journey, the lessons learned along the way, and how she turns adversities into opportunities. Let's get started. Welcome to the show, Katrina. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have this chat with you. So before we get right into it, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I live in Brooklyn, New York. I've lived here since 2007, so quite a long time. We live right by Prospect Park. I launched my own company last year doing consulting for tech companies, tech startups, and nonprofits. I am an operations junkie. And I've had quite what I like to call a jungle gym career. I started my career in media working for the Discovery Channel and then Bloomberg.
Awesome. I always like to have other women on that are in tech so we can like really get into it. So you've beautifully stated that your life is not about finding, sorry, let me repeat that. You've beautifully stated that life is not about finding yourself, but about creating it. Can you share a pivotal moment in your journey where you took a significant step towards creating the life you wanted, especially a moment that you might inspire our listeners to take the leap of faith in their own lives?
Sure, that's a great one. In my early 30s, went through a very tumultuous relationship in my personal life and made some decisions on what I truly wanted to be happy. And I think growing up, we have this vision of what, life should look like. You're going to get a stable job. You're going to stay in that job. You will marry someone. You will have 2.5 kids with a white picket fence. And getting to that point in my 30s, I realized that I had made all of these choices, but I actually wasn't happy. And I needed to understand, was I doing things out of obligation or was I doing them because I truly wanted them? And so it was a really tough time because coming into your own, finding your own voice and saying, these choices don't make me happy anymore. I need to change. And you're not only affecting your life, you're affecting other people's lives. But really starting to lean into what I wanted. And so I went on this path of kind of upending everything. I moved back into the city. I changed my role at work. So I didn't change where I was working, but I just changed my role at work. And I started to really lean into saying yes to stuff. And so one of my friends said, do you want to train for a half marathon? And I said, yes. It was terrible. And I said, I hate it. I don't like to run. Then we did the race and I was so inspired. I did 8 half marathons the following year and a full.
Oh, wow.
And then my friend said, do you want to do an Ironman triathlon? And I said, sure. And then I had to take some lessons. And so it was a point in my life where I sort of felt like the choices I had made to get there weren't necessarily things that were making me happy. And so I thought, let me take in all these new options. Let me just say yes to things and figure it out as I go. And I think for me, it was really empowering. It was really fun to kind of set these goals and then figure out how to make them happen.
I love that. I remember I went through a phase of my life too where I'm like, I'm going to say yes to everything. And then it got a little overwhelming, but I do love that idea.
It does. You have to have boundaries. Yeah, you do have to have boundaries,
Yeah,
especially
for saying no now.
yes, especially for people like us. I think that is actually my goal this year was actually to say no more. So
Awesome. So you competed in Ironman, which without knowing how to swim, is already like a huge challenge. I mean, Ironman alone is really like you have to be really strong to want to do that, but you don't even know how to swim. So, what strategies did you employ to overcoming that challenge?
it's a great question. I took swim lessons as an adult. And so I think it's important to understand that for an Ironman, you have to swim 2.4 miles.
That's a lot.
So exactly. And so while I hadn't drowned up until that point in my life, I couldn't really swim a distance. We would underwater swim or doggy paddle. And so I really needed to learn how to efficiently and effectively swim. Most Ironmen are also in open water. And so there's that element as well of you need to actually be able to swim, but it's not a pool. You don't see the bottom, you don't see the side, or you have to just go. And so it was overcoming a lot of fear.
Yeah.
I really forced myself to do a lot of swimming races. I really had to embrace that there were going to be times I might have to roll on my back and just breathe and, overcome an anxiety attack that was happening because I couldn't see the water or because something touched me. Training in New York was great because the water here is disgusting. And my race had actually very nice water compared to the water I had trained in. And so, I thought I went down there in Tennessee and I did a practice race just to get more familiar. When I went in and I put my hand and I could see my hand, I thought, oh, this is going to be great. So training in conditions that are far worse than what you're going to be racing in. And I think oftentimes for projects, that's the same thing that we try to apply, right? What is the worst case scenario of things that could happen? Let's plan for it. And then that way, when we go live, we're not going to have that problem. So basically a pre-mortem for the race.
Yeah.
I also made sure to pick a race that was optimized for the things I was good at. So going into it, I was a runner. And so I thought, okay, it doesn't really matter what the run course looks like, but what I care about is the swim. And I care about not having to swim against a current. And
Right.
so I picked a race that had what they call a downhill swim. So you swim with the current. And so it's really about optimizing your life for the things that are your strengths, right? Understanding, I think a lot of people spend time saying, oh, this is my weakness, I need to make it better. And to a certain extent, yes, to get to average, but in reality, you actually gain a lot more by optimizing for your weaknesses and your strengths. So understanding what you're good at, where you're going to make up time, and allowing yourself some grace on the things where maybe you're not. So picking a swim where I could swim with the current really helped.
I really like that. I love your whole strategy around training in New York, which was really bad. And then by the time you actually got to it, it was so much easier because you had already trained in these like awful conditions almost, right? I like that.
Exactly.
So talk to me about you're in tech, you work with tech companies. We all talk about women in tech. What is it that you do and what's it like for you? What's your day-to-day like?
So what I do now is a bit different than what I've done in my career.
Mhm.
So I work right now with companies that are looking to grow and scale. And my sweet spot is really taking an environment that's very chaotic and managing that chaos. So it's still going to remain chaotic because startups are chaotic. That's
Yeah.
just how they are. But there should be control to that chaos. And I bring that level of control to the chaos. I like to work with product and technology teams and where they sit with the business, because
Mm.
oftentimes the business and the tech team are actually speaking two different languages. And so the business might be saying, we need this. The engineering team is hearing they needed that.
Yeah.
And there's oftentimes that missing voice in between. Sometimes it's a product person that can help translate, but really taking that and understanding what is the engineering team trying to accomplish and what are they going to be able to deliver that the business actually needs for the outcomes, which might sometimes be different than exactly what the business asked for.
Yeah, I totally relate to that. So, um, you help these companies. What's the common out of all these different companies that you work with? What's the one common thing that you see that startups or companies trying to pivot or are in that stage struggle with the most?
Process.
Okay.
So
All running around with like chickens with their heads cut off at first.
So the thing is that as much as people love to say they don't like the chaos and they don't like the running around, they actually love it. And some people thrive on it. And when you try to say, no, we need to put a process in place, people will bring up every edge case they've ever heard of in their entire life and say, well, this won't fit. And you say, well, let's create a process for 90%. Well, but we have this and we have that. And the thing is that as you grow, as you start to bring on enterprise customers, as you start to move up market, you need scale or else you cannot operate. At some point, you can't keep throwing bodies at things.
Yeah.
And so while people think they want process, once you start to bring it in, there's a lot of change management involved with getting companies, getting people to accept process, to understand how it provides value, and to really lean into helping you iterate on it. Because the first process you put in place is probably not going to work, but there's going to be elements of it that you're going to take and things that you're going to iterate on that are specific to that business.
Do you find that once you sort of help a company put something in place and they adapt to it, is it like a wash, rinse, and repeat? No, go
That's it.
doing it.
Yeah, I think so. Yes and no. I think certain organizations have to have the right leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have a leader who's not supportive or who doesn't believe in it, those organizations typically have a lot harder time, and they're not able to take the process and apply it to other problems that they have. If the organization has strong leadership that's very visionary, but also understands what it takes to execute, then yes, they can take the frameworks and they can really apply them to different problems that they see. And they're able to then have a model for change within their organization. Because, the change management models that you see always need to be tweaked for the people in the org. There's never going to be a one size fits all.
Yeah. But when you're starting out for the first couple years, your team is really valuable and everyone's wearing multiple hats. What happens when, leadership wants to implement these processes and work with you to put these things in place, but the team is hesitant because they're so used to doing it a certain way? How do you go about that?
Yes. So it's really about understanding everyone's motivations. So there's something that gets you out of bed in the morning. There's something that gets me out of bed in the morning. It's different. It might be different one day to the next. So it's understanding the team and the motivations. It's also evaluating if you have the right leaders in place to grow. So I just had a call with a mentee this week. She's been at an organization for a long time as they've scaled from 70 employees to 1,000 employees.
Oh, wow.
And she's trying to decide if she really wants to stay. And she said, I just don't like the problems that I have now. I liked the problems when we were smaller. And we need to make that okay. That's acceptable. It's fine to say, actually, I really love the early stage chaos. And once it gets to be this level of a company, it's too much bureaucracy and it's too much red tape for me. And I would prefer to go back to an early stage where everything's kind of crazy and I'm, MacGyver doing all the things.
Yeah.
That's okay. And I think sometimes as leaders, we tend to want to hold on to people. And we forget that they also have their own career paths. They have their own things that they find interesting. And sometimes it's actually much better for a leader to be supportive of that person finding a role that makes them happy and that is good for their skill set than forcing them to shoehorn into a level of growth that they just don't want to be part of.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I've actually encountered something similar recently, and I was trying to keep someone who I really knew was not passionate about what they were doing anymore. And when I really, sat down and put some thought into it, I'm like, I'm actually causing the company more harm than good, and this person as well. Like, if they're not into this role anymore, then they're not being efficient and they're not being creative and they're not going above and beyond what they should be doing. They're just doing the bare minimum because like they're not happy. So sometimes I've learned in my career that sometimes people leaving is not always a bad thing. In most cases, it has turned out to be a good thing.
And it can be a good thing for all involved, right? So you might bring in some new blood that has a good idea and that it has a fresh perspective, and they might find something that really makes them happy and excited to be working again.
Yeah, that's very true. So let's talk about you've mentioned enduring sticky situations that have molded you into the person you are proud of today. Can you share an example of such a situation and the key takeaways or lesson learned? I'm calling it lesson learned because I used to call it failures, and people kept correcting me around failures means you failed, but lessons learned means you didn't do well, but then you got into it. So we can talk about that. But could you tell us what something that could help our listeners navigate their personal and professional adversities from those lessons learned?
Yes. So we can talk a little bit about that. I actually love the term failure because I have a gamification of that, of trying to get to 100 failures. And so I think when you make it into a game, it becomes a lot more acceptable to fail. And I think it's fail fast, fail forward, learn from it.
Yeah.
Some of the sticky situations. So this one is tricky. When you're working very closely with founders and CEOs, and you're in a position where you're sort of their right hand, it's your responsibility to take something that they have a vision for or that they've decided and implement it in an organization. It can be extremely difficult if you don't 100% agree with their direction.
Mm.
And in chief of staff roles, that's very apparent because you're sort of the face of a lot of these decisions. You're the person who has to go to the org, explain to them why this is the right decision. And that can be hard when you fundamentally disagree with the decision. And so that's definitely one of the scenarios. And that's actually something that led me to start my own company, so that I could have a bit more control over my clients and what their missions and visions were and how people were treated at particular companies that I was working with. And I think the most important thing is understanding your own values, being comfortable with your own values, and then being able to make decisions that are in alignment with those values, even if they're scary. And so it's not always going to be the easy path. Sorry, that's my dog. It's not always going to be the easy path to do the right thing, but you still have to do it. And you have to feel comfortable. No one else can tell you this is the right thing for you to do. You have to make the choice and you have to be comfortable with it.
Yeah. What advice would you give to, I know being a founder, an entrepreneur, it can be really challenging. And one of the things that I get over and over again, and I experienced it myself, was, you can get to a certain plateau where it becomes a really lonely place to be. And, I know surrounding yourself with the right people is key, but before you get there, that loneliness can put you in a state of mind. What advice do you have for people who are sort of there or getting there, how to deal with it?
Surrounding yourself with the right people is key. I think sometimes we often think that's our friends and family, but it doesn't have to be. They might not actually be as supportive because they may be worried. They are invested in you and your happiness, and they may have their own vision of what they think makes you happy. So when I first started on this journey, I sought out a lot of women's networking groups that were dedicated to entrepreneurs and were very focused on giving women the resources that they needed to launch their own companies and then bringing them together and allowing them to talk to each other, to talk about the challenges they're having, to ask for help, to create a safe space where you can exchange ideas or you can offer services and exchange those services. And I think for me, that's actually been one of the biggest things because it's also brought me a new group of women who understand what I'm going through. My friends, they're supportive and they are very, happy and excited for all the things I do. But if I called them and said, I have this customer issue and this is what's happening, they're not going to know what advice to give me other than to just listen. And it's just not their background. It's not their skill set. And so having this group that you can go to that actually understands the journey you're going through is just so important.
I agree with you 1,000%. I found myself at one point always going to conferences, and in conferences, you're sitting and listening, but you don't get access to the speakers, right? So then afterwards, it's like, well, I'm kind of still where I'm still in the place where I was when I first got here. I didn't really get anything out of it. So I love that idea of joining, groups or networks where you can actually have conversations and get value out of them. So for those who don't know where to find something like that, do you have any advice?
So it's funny. I started going on Eventbrite and looking for networking events in New York. And then I looked at the ones that were for women because I wanted to find the people. And then once I started doing that, you ask someone, hey, what kind of groups are you part of? And they'll say, oh, I'm part of this group or that group. And it opens up a lot of doors. So you have to be willing to ask questions, do a bit of market research. I think they're becoming more popular on things like Instagram and even things like LinkedIn. One of the best ones that I'm part of is called Dreamers and Doers, which came about because I was on a networking tour. I met someone who introduced me to someone who said, you should be part of this group and applications close tomorrow. Do you want to apply? And I said, sure.
Yeah.
So just being open, again, saying yes to things, but asking people who you admire or people who are in the same situation as you, what groups are you going to? And if you can't find one in your area, starting one.
Yeah.
You be the person.
That's true. I like that. So your passion for helping other women feel seen and heard is inspiring. In your experience, what is the most effective way for women entrepreneurs to to support each other in industries where they may feel underrepresented or unheard?
So I like to walk the talk.
Okay.
When I bought my co-op, I really wanted a female lawyer and I was insistent. And my real estate agent said, there's no way you're going to find anyone familiar with co-op law. You just have to go with one of these same law firms that everybody goes with. I said, no, I'm going to find somebody. And it took me an extra 2 weeks, but I found someone. And it was important to me to be able to say, I went and sought out a female lawyer. I got one. It took a little bit of work. It was definitely some legwork. I could much easily have gone with the list of 5 lawyers that my real estate agent had given me. But if I hadn't done that work and then I went on to say we should promote women into these roles and we should support women, I'm not really supporting them.
Yeah.
So I did the same thing recently when I launched my business to find a CPA. In Brooklyn, there is no shortage of male CPAs. It was a bit hard to find a female CPA. Once I found her, I loved her. And I started to talk about her to the other women who I'm working with and saying, hey guys, I have this amazing CPA. She's wonderful. It's an all-female staff. You should definitely check them out if you're in the market for a CPA. So it's a lot about amplifying.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a lot about understanding and having grace for the different struggles that we face that others may not face, and being able to create space for that, space to talk about it, space to provide advice or even just an ear to listen when people are being marginalized or not listened to. I think oftentimes too, I work with nonprofits as well. And a lot of the nonprofits that I work with are working with communities that don't have the same access to resources. And so opening up that access, making sure that you as a person, when you have a role that you're looking for, or when you have a vendor that you need to fill, that you're looking at the options and choosing the best option available to you.
Yeah. So recently, I keep having this conversation because I'm in tech about diversity and all those things. And recently I find that maybe I'm 100% wrong. This is my own personal, you know, thought. I find that a lot of males are frustrated with the whole diversity thing. And someone said to me, I'm really annoyed with this whole thing. And I'm like, okay, why? He's like, because, I went out of my way to hire a woman to be in this role, but she sucks, and all the men that I've had in that role are way better. And I've had to spend way more time to train her. And that's it. I'm kind of done with this whole thing. I don't care anymore. And the impression I get is that number one, it takes more time to find women, so it's a longer hiring process, and they're not getting the same quality of work. What do you say to that?
I think so. This is a conversation that we have often in my house.
Okay.
My husband is a software engineer. I think for me, it's about education earlier before they even get the roles, and making the education available
Hmm.
and ensuring it's not just about hiring a woman. It's about hiring a qualified woman. It's about making sure that we're providing them the same access to education and the same access to resources so that they're able to perform the way they need to perform once they get the role. I do think that there are cases where once someone is hired, there might be additional training or additional help you might need to provide because perhaps they didn't have those access to training. But in reality, we shouldn't look at that as a female versus male issue. We should look at it as an education problem. Maybe the school they went to didn't have the same access as, MIT or another university might have had.
What do you think the benefits are to a team that has a diversity, different opinions, and different perspectives?
Be open to conflict.
Okay.
So one of the things I found is that sometimes teams will get together, really diverse voices, and then they're like, why doesn't everyone agree? Everyone should just agree. Well, there's very healthy conflict.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point of having all these different voices, is that you're getting new ideas, you're getting new things. You're being able to hear someone else's perspective on something. And I think, in my opinion, that's actually the way you get the best products. Because if you have a whole team of the same people sitting around deciding how to build a product, but they're not the end user for the product, that's not good.
Yeah.
And so leaders that lead diverse teams have to be very strong leaders. They have to understand how to manage conflict. They have to understand how to lead productive discussions that are able to disagree and then come to a conclusion. And they have to be able to facilitate that. And I think sometimes leaders are not ready to do that. So they want a diverse team in practice, but then once it happens, they say, I can't, everyone's always fighting or everyone's always arguing. It's not really arguing, right? They're just voicing their opinions and their ideas. And it's your job to facilitate that into something beautiful.
Okay, I really like that. Let's go back to process a little bit. So what would be your advice to companies that want to set up in a way that, yes, they're still going to have the chaos, but early on, they're sort of thinking about pivoting and growing and having processes in place? What can they do at the very early stage to set themselves up for some success when they do implement those processes?
I wish people would ask this question more often. So you really have to start from the very beginning. You should have an SOP for everything. Okay. And the reason for doing that, and an SOP just is a standard operating process, but the reason for doing that is, as a founder, at some point, you're going to want to go on vacation. Right. Or you're going to want to hire somebody. And everything can't be in your head. Because if everything's in your head, then the business can't exist without you.
Yeah.
And in reality, even in those very early days when no one cares about your business more than you do, it's still so key that you're already thinking about what's going to happen a year from now, when I need to hire an EA and I don't know what I'm going to turn over to them, or when I need to hire a salesperson and I don't have a documented sales process other than I just email people. And so thinking through in those early stages, and it doesn't need to be beautiful. It doesn't need to be pretty. I mean, it could be a Google Doc where you say, these are the 5 steps. These are the things that you need access to. These are the accounts that I'm using. But just getting everything centralized and thinking through, if I wasn't the person doing this, what needed to be done or what training would they need? Yeah. Because in reality, and there's 2 ways to think about it. Maybe you're making a lifestyle business and you don't plan on scaling and expanding it. And so in your mind, you think to yourself, I'm never going to need help. But everyone's going to need help at some point. You're going to want to hire someone to do marketing, or you're going to want to hire someone to help with your socials. And the earlier you start getting all that stuff documented, the much easier it will be to onboard those people.
Yeah, I interviewed someone a while back, and one of the things he had said to me, he was on the investor side. He said that, companies who want to eventually exit really need to prepare themselves not to be dependent on the founder, because investors are not really going to, they don't want to invest on companies that are 1000% dependent on one.
Exactly.
They want to be able to continue, selling and doing business without that original founder. So to your point, I think there's that addition as well. So it's a good point. So before we get to the end and wrap up, I just want to ask you one last question. You hosted a vision board party to foster creativity and support among women from different backgrounds. How have activities like these influenced your approach to business and personal growth? And why do you think it's important for entrepreneurs to engage in similar community building efforts?
So the vision board party came about because I went on my networking tour last summer and fall, and I started collecting people from all the different events that I went to. And I thought, this person should really meet that person, and this person could actually bring very, value to this circle. And so I thought, I'd never done a vision board, but I thought it would be a fun thing to try for 2024. And so I brought together women who didn't know each other. None of them had met. I think maybe 1 or 2 had met, but none of them had really known each other prior to the event. Some of them were from past jobs. Some of them were from networking events over the summer. Some of them were from different groups I had joined. And I brought them all to my apartment in Brooklyn and gave them all the resources that they needed to create vision boards and talk through what are the types of things we wanted to put on them and how are we going to make them a reality. Less about the grand vision and more about what were the incremental things we needed to do. And then just let them start talking.
Yeah.
And it's been so fun. We did that in the beginning of December, and it's been so fun to watch how some of them have now shown up on Instagram going to events together or have started working together. And it's been amazing to see how that little germination from bringing those people together has then resulted in new connections and new pathways being forged. And for me, that's actually what I love to do. So I do a lot of mentoring. I do a lot of coaching. And it's all about, I can't impact everyone, but it's sort of like the ripples when you throw a rock into a pond. So
Right.
I can impact one person. When they go out, they can impact the people in their world. And so how can you bring good and light and all the things you want to bring to the world? It's by impacting the people that you have in your circle. And then they go out and they further, create impact.
Yeah. And I mean, if you're older, past your 30s, I think it's a lot harder to make new friends and
It's very hard.
so this is such a nice way for, it's a small group and you can really like connect with someone. Who knows, right? They could either help your business or they can become your new best friend.
Exactly. We had two people who were brand new to New York City and so didn't really know anyone and had been here a few months and thought, now what? And now they have this resource of people who have lived here for years who are able to sort of guide them, help them pick neighborhoods, show them the good spots to go to. And you're right, it's so much harder to meet friends in your 30s and 40s. It's just
Yeah. I also find that like a lot of my friends don't do what I do. So like
Mhm.
you mentioned this before, you can have a conversation with them about, something in your business or in your work and they'll listen, but they don't really know what feedback to give you. But when you have those other types of connections with people that are wearing the same shoes, you can have that feedback and the conversation and the friendship is just different.
Exactly. And I think it's so important to have all of those different aspects in
Yeah.
your circle, just for the reason of diversity of ideas, right? So, people might give you different ideas to solve a problem, and you're able to kind of take it all, synthesize it, and decide the best path.
Yeah. So before we wrap up, what if there's something you could leave our audience with, what would it be?
Wow, that's a big one. I think for me, it's all about not living based off other people's expectations, really getting to know yourself and understanding what drives you, and then having the faith to go after that. And so believing in yourself, understanding that if it's in your control and in your power, you can make it happen. There will be blockers, there will be obstacles, and how you deal with those and get through those or around those is going to be, what you look back on as you go through life.
I love that because it sort of tells people be tenacious. And this is
Exactly.
nasty. So how can everyone find you, reach out to you, give us all of your information?
Sure. So my website that my lovely husband built is just katrinapurcell.com. I am on LinkedIn as well and pretty active. And then on a more personal side, I'm on Instagram, just at IronKiki26. So a little shout out to the Ironman there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the episode today. I really enjoyed our conversation. This was really lovely.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you. And that's a wrap. I want to thank Katrina for joining me today and sharing her journey and invaluable insights with us. Her story is a testament to the power of resilience and the beauty of creating one's own path in life. To our listeners, thank you for joining me on this journey of discovery and inspiration. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite platform and join our community on social media. I would love to hear from you. Leave a review and tell me what topics you'd like me to explore in future episodes. Remember, the future belongs to those who embrace change and innovation with tenacity. Keep striving, keep innovating, and most importantly, stay tenacious in your pursuits. Thank you for tuning in. I look forward to bringing you more inspiring conversations in our upcoming episodes. This is Sonia signing off, but as always, remember to chase your dreams with tenacity.